The June heat was suffocating inside Boston Garden as 23-year-old Mike O'Sullivan climbed the narrow stairs toward the upper balcony, clutching a $15 ticket that represented 2 days of tips from his job waiting tables at Durgin Park. It was June 9th, 1987, Game 4 of the NBA Finals between the Boston Celtics and Los Angeles Lakers, and Mike was about to witness something that would change his understanding of what separated champions from everyone else. The ticket had come from a regular customer at the restaurant, an older guy named Frank, who'd taken pity on a young waiter from Southie who talked constantly about basketball but had never been able to afford playoff tickets. Frank had slipped Mike the ticket along with his usual 20% tip, saying only, "Kid, you don't want to miss this one. Trust me." Mike had grown up in South Boston, the son of a longshoreman who'd worked the docks for 30 years, and a mother who'd cleaned offices downtown to help make ends meet. The Celtics weren't just entertainment in the O'Sullivan household. They were tribal identity, civic pride, and proof that a blue-collar city could produce champions who reflected its values of toughness, determination, and collective effort over individual glory. The 1987 Finals represented something special for Boston basketball fans. This was the rubber match between the two greatest teams of the 1980s. The Lakers and Celtics had split their previous two finals meetings in 1984 and 1985, and this series would determine which franchise would claim superiority in one of the greatest rivalries in sports history. But the series wasn't going well for Boston. The Lakers had won Game 1 in Los Angeles, 126-113. The Celtics had responded with a hard-fought Game 2 victory, 122-109. And then the Lakers had taken Game 3 at Boston Garden, 103-109, to grab a 2-1 series lead. Now, facing the possibility of falling behind 3-1, the Celtics needed a victory in Game 4 to keep their championship hopes alive. Mike's seat was in Section 25 of the Garden's upper balcony, so far from the court that the players looked like action figures moving around a board game. But he was inside the most famous basketball arena in the world on the night when his team faced elimination. And that felt like participation in something larger than his normal routine of serving clam chowder and struggling to pay rent on a studio apartment in Southie. The Garden was packed with the kind of intense, partisan crowd that made Boston basketball legendary. These weren't casual fans looking for entertainment. These were people who'd arranged their lives around Celtics basketball, who understood that tonight might determine whether the Bird-McHale Parish era would end with another championship or with the bitter taste of defeat to their biggest rivals. As Mike found his seat and looked around the arena, he could feel the desperation that marked potential elimination games. Everyone in the building understood what was at stake. Not just one game, but the trajectory of one of the greatest rivalries in sports history, the legacy of players who had defined 1980s basketball. "First finals game?" asked the man sitting next to Mike, a guy who looked to be in his 40s and was wearing a Celtics jersey that had clearly seen better years. "First playoff game, period," Mike replied. "Been following the team my whole life, but never had the money for tickets like this." "Lee, I'm Tommy Flanagan. Been coming to Garden games since the Russell days. You picked a hell of a night to start. Potential elimination game against the Lakers." As they talked, Mike learned that Tommy was an electrician from Cambridge who'd maintained season tickets through decades of financial struggle because he understood that Celtics basketball represented something essential about Boston identity. These tickets weren't entertainment expenses, they were investments in community pride, proof that working-class people could witness greatness if they were willing to sacrifice other comforts. "What do you think about our chances tonight?" Mike asked, as the teams warmed up on the court below. Tommy studied both teams' preparation with the expression of someone who'd seen enough basketball to understand the significance of body language and energy levels. "We're desperate," he said honestly. Desperate teams either play their best basketball or they fold under pressure. Tonight, we find out which kind of team we really are. It was true. Even from the upper balcony, Mike could see the intensity in the Celtics' warm-up routine. Larry Bird's shots were falling with his usual precision, but his movements carried the weight of someone who understood this might be one of his final opportunities to beat Magic Johnson in the finals. Kevin McHale was moving carefully, still bothered by the foot injury that had limited his effectiveness throughout the playoffs. Robert Parrish looked focused, but showed every bit of his 33 years. The Lakers, meanwhile, looked like a team that had already tasted victory. Magic Johnson was orchestrating their warm-ups with his characteristic flair. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was moving with surprising fluidity for a 39-year-old center, and James Worthy was attacking practice shots with the kind of athletic confidence that suggested complete belief in his team's superiority. But it was Pat Riley who caught Mike's attention during the pre-game period. The Lakers coach, immaculately dressed as always in his expensive suit, was pacing the sideline with an intensity that seemed to radiate throughout the arena. Riley had become famous for his composure under pressure, but tonight he looked like a man who understood that this game could define his legacy as much as his players. "Look at Riley," Mike said to Tommy. "He looks more intense than usual." "Championship pressure does that to coaches," Tommy replied. "Some guys get calmer, some guys get more wound up. Riley's always been intense, but in a controlled way. Tonight he looks like he's about to explode." The pre-game introductions felt more emotional than usual, with Garden fans understanding they might be witnessing a crucial moment in one of the greatest rivalries in sports history. When Bird's name was announced, the ovation was thunderous and sustained, carrying the weight of appreciation for everything he'd meant to the franchise and the city. But as the game began, it became clear that both teams understood they were playing for something larger than just one victory. This wasn't just Game 4 of the 1987 finals. This was a battle for supremacy between two franchises, two playing styles, two philosophies about what championship basketball should look like. The first quarter was a masterpiece of playoff intensity, with both teams playing at levels that seemed to transcend their regular season capabilities. The Celtics, energized by their crowd and playing with the desperation of a team facing elimination, jumped out to an early lead behind Bird's shooting and aggressive defense that disrupted the Lakers' usually smooth, offensive rhythm. But the Lakers responded with the kind of composed excellence that had made them champions. Magic's court vision seemed supernatural, finding teammates for easy baskets even when the Celtics appeared to have every passing lane covered. Kareem's skyhook was unstoppable, arcing over Celtic defenders with the precision that had made it the most reliable shot in basketball history. "This is what championship basketball looks like," Tommy shouted over the crowd noise as the teams traded baskets throughout the first quarter, both teams playing at their absolute peak. Mike found himself studying not just the players, but the coaches, understanding that at this level, strategic adjustments and emotional leadership could determine outcomes as much as athletic ability. K.C. Jones was working the referees and making subtle lineup changes that maximized his aging roster's effectiveness. But it was Riley who commanded attention, stalking the sideline with an intensity that seemed to energize his players even during timeouts. By the end of the first quarter, the score was tied 28-28, and Mike realized he was witnessing something special. Not just a great game, but a demonstration of what happened when two championship-caliber teams played at their absolute peak with everything on the line. The question was whether either team could maintain this level of intensity for 48 minutes, or whether the pressure would eventually cause someone to crack under the weight of championship expectations. In section 25 of the Garden's upper balcony, Mike O'Sullivan was about to find out what $15 could buy when the stakes were championship high and both teams were operating at levels that bordered on basketball perfection. But it was Pat Riley's sideline intensity that would stick with him most, the understanding that championship leadership meant maintaining focus and demanding excellence even when facing the best competition in the world. His second quarter began with both teams understanding that they were engaged in something larger than just a basketball game. Mike O'Sullivan could feel the electricity in Boston Garden building with each possession as 14,890 people witnessed the kind of playoff basketball that separated the NBA Finals from every other sporting event. "Look at the way both teams are executing," Tommy Flanagan said as Magic Johnson found Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for another unstoppable skyhook. "This isn't just talent. This is championship preparation meeting championship opportunity." Mike watched the Lakers' offensive precision with grudging admiration. Even as a Celtics fan, he could appreciate what he was seeing from the visitors. Every screen was perfectly timed, every pass was exactly where it needed to be, every shot was taken within the flow of an offensive system that had been refined through years of championship experience. But the Celtics were responding with their own version of excellence. Larry Bird was hitting shots from angles that seemed impossible, using his basketball intelligence to compensate for athletic limitations that were becoming more apparent with each season. Kevin McHale was scoring in the post despite obvious discomfort from his injured foot, his array of moves around the basket creating scoring opportunities that defied both defensive schemes and medical advice. "McHale's playing on one good foot and still making those shots," Mike observed as the Celtics forward scored on another impossible turnaround jumper. "That's what separates champions from everyone else," Tommy replied. "When your body's breaking down, when the pain is overwhelming, champions find ways to keep performing." But it was the coaching battle that provided the most compelling drama of the second quarter. Casey Jones was making the kind of subtle adjustments that had made him successful throughout his career, changing defensive assignments to disrupt the Lakers' rhythm, finding rest for his aging stars without compromising the team's intensity. Pat Riley, meanwhile, was demonstrating why he'd become one of the most respected coaches in basketball. His timeout speeches were brief but intense. His substitution patterns maximized his team's athletic advantages, and his sideline presence seemed to communicate complete confidence that his system would eventually overwhelm Boston's determination. "Riley's not just coaching basketball," Mike said to Tommy during a timeout midway through the second quarter. "He's conducting a symphony. Look how calm he looks while everything's chaos around him." "That's championship coaching," Tommy agreed. "When everyone else is getting emotional, great coaches stay focused on execution." The score remained close throughout the second quarter, with neither team able to establish more than a 4-point lead. Every possession carried enormous weight. Every shot was contested. Every call was magnified by the understanding that momentum could shift dramatically with a single play. Mike found himself studying the individual matchups that would determine the game's outcome. Magic Johnson versus Dennis Johnson was a battle between the league's most creative point guard and one of its most tenacious defenders. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar versus Robert Parrish was a confrontation between basketball intelligence and athletic determination. James Worthy versus Larry Bird represented the contrast between explosive athleticism and basketball genius. But it was the crowd that provided the most significant factor in the second quarter. Boston Garden was reaching noise levels that seemed to affect the Lakers' execution, particularly on offensive possessions where communication was crucial. The building's acoustics, combined with the partisan intensity of 14,190 Celtic fans, was creating an environment that challenged even the most experienced visiting players. "Listen to this crowd," Mike said as the Celtics scored on another fast break basket. "They're trying to will the team to victory." "Garden magic," Tommy replied. "Some buildings just have an atmosphere that can change games. This place has been deciding championships for decades." By halftime, the score was 67-63 in favor of the Lakers, and both teams headed to their locker rooms, understanding that they'd played 24 minutes of basketball at the highest level imaginable. The statistical sheet told the story of two evenly matched teams. The Lakers were shooting slightly better from the field, but the Celtics had more offensive rebounds and fewer turnovers. "Whoever wins the third quarter probably wins the game," Tommy said, as they watched the teams leave the court. "Both teams are playing at their peak. It's going to come down to execution and maybe a little luck." Mike spent halftime studying the faces of fans around him, understanding that everyone in the building was processing the same realization. They were witnessing greatness from both teams, the kind of championship-level basketball that would be remembered and analyzed for decades. The third quarter began with an intensity that somehow exceeded what they'd witnessed in the first half. Both teams seemed to understand that the next 12 minutes would likely determine not just this game, but the trajectory of the entire series. The Lakers struck first, with Magic Johnson finding Worthy for an easy basket that extended their lead to 6 points. But the Celtics responded immediately, with Bird hitting a three-pointer that sent the crowd into hysterics and cut the deficit to 3. "This is what finals basketball is supposed to look like," Mike said, as both teams continued trading baskets, neither team giving an inch. It was during this crucial third quarter that Mike began to notice something remarkable about Pat Riley's coaching. The Lakers coach wasn't just making strategic adjustments, he was managing the emotional temperature of his team, keeping them focused on execution even when the crowd noise reached levels that made communication difficult. Riley's timeouts were masterclasses in championship leadership. He would gather his players, speak quietly but intensely, and send them back onto the court with clear instructions and renewed confidence. His substitution patterns kept fresh legs on the court while maintaining the offensive and defensive systems that had made the Lakers successful. "Watch how Riley handles these timeouts," Mike said to Tommy. "He's not just drawing up plays, he's keeping his team mentally in the game." That's the difference between good coaches and great coaches," Tommy replied. "Great coaches understand that at this level, the mental game is just as important as the physical game." The third quarter ended with the Lakers leading 89-81, and Mike could feel the energy in the building shifting slightly. The Celtics were still very much in the game, but the Lakers had managed to extend their lead at exactly the moment when momentum was most crucial. But as the fourth quarter was about to begin, Mike realized that he'd witnessed something remarkable during the third quarter. Not just great basketball, but a demonstration of what championship leadership looked like under the most intense pressure imaginable. Pat Riley had shown his team how to maintain focus and execute their system even when facing a hostile crowd and a desperate opponent. His calm authority in crucial moments had been the difference between a close game and a Lakers advantage that might prove decisive. "Fourth quarter," Tommy said, as the teams prepared to return to the court. "This is when legends are made." Mike nodded, understanding that regardless of which team won, he'd already witnessed something that would shape his understanding of excellence under pressure for the rest of his life. But the best was yet to come, and Pat Riley's finest moment as a leader was still 12 minutes away. The fourth quarter began with the Los Angeles Lakers leading 89-81, and Mike O'Sullivan could feel Boston Garden reaching the kind of desperate intensity that made elimination games legendary. Around him, 1,490 Celtic fans were creating a wall of sound. that seemed to vibrate through the building's ancient steel beams, understanding that the next 12 minutes would determine whether their championship hopes lived or died. "This is it," Tommy Flanagan said, gripping his seat with white knuckles. "If we don't cut into this lead in the next few minutes, it's over." The Celtics began the fourth quarter with the kind of desperation that had carried them through 3 decades of championship basketball. Larry Bird was hitting shots from impossible angles, Kevin McHale was scoring despite obvious pain from his injured foot, and Robert Parrish was playing with an intensity that belied his 33 years. But it was Dennis Johnson who provided the spark that ignited Boston's comeback. The veteran guard, often overlooked in discussions of the Celtics' stars, began attacking the Lakers' defense with a combination of intelligence and athletic ability that disrupted their offensive rhythm and created easy scoring opportunities for his teammates. "DJ's taking over," Mike said, as Johnson hit his 3rd consecutive shot to cut the Lakers' lead to 4 points. "When he plays like this, we're really tough to beat." The crowd was on its feet now, sensing that their team was mounting the kind of fourth-quarter rally that had become synonymous with Celtic pride. The noise level inside the Garden was so intense that Lakers players were having difficulty communicating on offensive possessions, and their usually precise execution was beginning to show signs of strain. But it was during this crucial stretch that Mike witnessed something that would stay with him for the rest of his life: Pat Riley's demonstration of championship coaching under maximum pressure. As the Celtics cut the Lakers' lead to 95-93, with 6 minutes remaining, Riley called timeout. Mike watched the Lakers coach gather his players with the kind of calm authority that had made him one of the most respected leaders in professional sports. Riley didn't scream or panic or show any sign of the frustration that might have overwhelmed a lesser coach. Instead, he spoke quietly but intensely to his players, his body language communicating complete confidence that his team would execute the plays that had made them champions. "Look at Riley," Mike said to Tommy during the timeout. "The building's going crazy. His team's lead is disappearing, and he looks like he's discussing dinner plans." "That's championship leadership," Tommy replied, though his voice carried admiration even for the opposing coach. "When everyone else is losing their minds, great leaders stay focused on what needs to be done." The timeout ended, and the Lakers returned to the court with renewed purpose. Magic Johnson began attacking the basket more aggressively, drawing fouls and getting to the free throw line, where his percentage was among the best in the league. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar established better position in the post, using his experience to neutralize Robert Parrish's defensive intensity. But it was James Worthy who provided the crucial response to Boston's rally. The Lakers forward, playing perhaps the best basketball of his career throughout the 1987 playoffs, began attacking the rim with the kind of athletic explosiveness that reminded everyone why he'd been the first overall pick in the 1982 draft. Worthy's dunk with 4 minutes remaining extended the Lakers' lead back to 6 points and seemed to deflate the Garden crowd momentarily. But the Celtics, playing with the desperation of a team that understood this might be their last chance, responded with another run that cut the deficit to 2 points with 2 minutes remaining. "This is the greatest game I've ever seen," Mike said to Tommy, as both teams continued trading baskets. "Neither team will give an inch." The final 2 minutes unfolded with the kind of intensity that defined championship basketball. Every possession carried enormous weight. Every shot was contested. Every call was magnified by the understanding that one mistake could end a season. It was during this stretch that Magic Johnson produced the moment that would define not just this game, but his legacy as a clutch performer. With the shot clock winding down and the Celtics' defense converging on him, Magic drove to the basket and released a running hook shot, the famous baby hook, that arced over Robert Parrish's outstretched hand and dropped through the net with 12 seconds remaining. The shot gave the Lakers a 107-105 lead and effectively ended Boston's championship hopes. The Garden fell silent as 890 people realized they'd just witnessed one of the greatest clutch shots in NBA Finals history. "Baby hook," Tommy said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of resigned admiration that marked true basketball fans. Magic Johnson with the baby hook to win Game 4. Mike watched Magic's celebration after the shot. Not flashy showboating, but the satisfied smile of someone who delivered under the most intense pressure imaginable. The Lakers' point guard had waited until the most crucial moment of the series to produce his signature shot, the kind of performance that separated great players from legendary ones. But even as he appreciated Magic's brilliance, Mike found himself thinking about the sequence of events that had made the shot possible. Pat Riley's timeout management throughout the fourth quarter, his ability to keep his team focused on execution even when facing a hostile crowd and a desperate opponent, had been the foundation that allowed Magic to deliver his masterpiece. "Riley set that up," Mike said to Tommy as the final seconds ticked away. The way he managed the fourth quarter, kept his team calm, made the right substitutions. That's what gave Magic the opportunity to make that shot. The final score was Lakers 107, Celtics 105, and the series now stood at 3-1 in favor of Los Angeles. The Celtics' championship hopes were effectively over, and the Bird era was ending with a loss that felt as inevitable as it was heartbreaking. As the Lakers celebrated on the court and the Celtic fans began their slow exodus from the building, Mike realized he'd witnessed something that would shape his understanding of leadership under pressure for the rest of his life. Magic's baby hook would be remembered by millions of people as one of the greatest shots in finals history. But Mike would never forget Pat Riley's calm authority during those crucial fourth-quarter timeouts. The way the Lakers coach had shown his team what championship leadership looked like when everything was on the line. "That's what separates champions from everyone else," Mike said to Tommy as they prepared to leave their seats. "It's not just talent, it's having leaders who can execute under pressure that would break most people." Tommy nodded, understanding that they'd witnessed something larger than just a basketball game. They'd seen the exact moment when championship leadership had met championship opportunity, and the result had been one of the greatest performances in finals history. As Mike began the long walk down from Section 25, he carried with him not just the memory of Magic's shot, but the understanding that greatness required leaders who could maintain focus and demand excellence even when facing the most intense pressure imaginable. Sometimes the most important lessons aren't found in the highlight reels. Sometimes they're found in the quiet moments when leaders show their teams what championship determination really looks like. The bus ride home from Boston Garden felt like traveling through the aftermath of a natural disaster. Mike O'Sullivan sat among hundreds of devastated Celtic fans, all of them processing what they'd just witnessed. Magic Johnson's baby hook shot, the Lakers' stunning fourth-quarter execution, and the growing realization that the Bird era was ending not with a championship celebration, but with the bitter taste of defeat to their greatest rivals. But Mike found himself thinking less about Magic's shot and more about the sequence of events that had made it possible. Pat Riley's masterful fourth-quarter coaching, his ability to keep his team focused on execution even when facing a hostile crowd and desperate opponent, the calm leadership that had allowed his players to perform at their best when the stakes were highest. When Mike arrived at his studio apartment in Southie, he found himself unable to sleep despite the emotional exhaustion that followed such an intense sporting event. He sat at his small kitchen table and tried to write down everything he could remember about the game, understanding that he'd witnessed something that would be discussed and analyzed for decades. But the more he wrote, the more he focused on Riley's leadership during those crucial fourth-quarter minutes. The Lakers coach hadn't just managed a basketball game. He demonstrated what championship leadership looked like under maximum pressure, and his players had responded by executing at levels that seemed to transcend normal human capability. The next morning, Mike woke up to newspaper headlines that confirmed what everyone had suspected. The Lakers would close out the series in Game 6, ending the Celtics' championship hopes and effectively concluding one of the greatest rivalries in sports history. Magic's baby hook was already being hailed as one of the greatest clutch shots in finals history. Magic's masterpiece, read the Boston Globe sports section. Baby hook breaks Celtic hearts, proclaimed the Herald. Every analysis focused on Johnson's shot, the athletic brilliance that had delivered victory under impossible pressure. At work that day, serving lunch to the usual crowd of downtown office workers and tourists at Durgin Park, Mike found himself constantly interrupted by customers who wanted to discuss the previous night's game. Everyone had theories about Magic's shot, about what it meant for both franchises, about whether the Celtics could somehow extend the series. But nobody seemed to focus on what Mike considered equally important, Pat Riley's demonstration of championship leadership during those crucial fourth-quarter minutes. "You were there?" asked Frank, the regular customer who'd given Mike the ticket. What was it like to watch that ending? Mike thought about the question while refilling Frank's coffee cup. How do you explain to someone who wasn't there that you'd witnessed something larger than just an athletic achievement? How do you describe the moment when leadership under pressure had created the foundation for individual brilliance? Magic's shot was incredible, Mike said finally. But what stuck with me was watching Pat Riley coach that fourth quarter. The way he managed timeouts, kept his team calm, made adjustments under pressure, that's what made Magic's shot possible. Frank looked puzzled. What do you mean? I mean, Riley showed his team what championship leadership looks like when everything's on the line. He didn't panic when we made our run, didn't get emotional when the crowd was going crazy. He just kept his team focused on executing their system. And because of that leadership, Magic was in position to make the greatest shot of his career. Frank nodded slowly, understanding that Mike had observed something that most fans had missed. Leadership creates opportunities for greatness, he said. The Lakers did indeed close out the series in Game 6, with Magic Johnson earning Finals MVP honors for his overall performance throughout the series. But it was his baby hook in Game 4 that became the signature moment, replayed on highlight reels and remembered as one of the greatest clutch shots in basketball history. But Mike continued to think about Pat Riley's fourth-quarter coaching, about the lesson he'd learned regarding leadership under pressure, about the understanding that championship success required not just individual brilliance, but leaders who could create environments where that brilliance could emerge. The experience shaped Mike's approach to his own life in ways that became clear over the following months and years. When he faced difficult decisions about career changes, when he struggled with relationship challenges, when he encountered setbacks that seemed overwhelming, he found himself thinking about Riley's calm authority during those crucial timeout moments. "You know what I learned that night?" Mike would tell his children years later when they asked about his most memorable experience at a sporting event. "I learned that great leaders don't panic under pressure. They stay focused on what needs to be done, they trust their systems, and they create environments where other people can achieve greatness." Mike did eventually leave the restaurant business, using the confidence he'd gained from watching Riley's demonstration of championship leadership to start his own small construction company. Throughout his career as a contractor, he tried to apply the lessons he'd learned from that night at Boston Garden, the understanding that leadership meant maintaining focus and supporting others even when facing seemingly impossible circumstances. In 2006, when Pat Riley was coaching the Miami Heat to their first NBA championship, Mike found himself watching the finals with particular interest. He wanted to see if the coach who'd provided him with his most important lesson about leadership could apply those same principles 20 years later with a different team. When the Heat won the championship, with Riley's leadership playing a crucial role in their success, Mike felt a sense of validation about the lesson he'd learned in 1987. Great leadership principles transcended specific situations, specific teams, specific eras. In 2008, when Pat Riley was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame, Mike made the trip to Springfield, Massachusetts for the ceremony. He wanted to hear the coach who taught him about leadership under pressure receive the recognition he deserved. After the ceremony, Mike approached Riley during a public signing session and told him about being at Game 4 of the 1987 Finals. "That was one hell of a series," Riley said, signing a program for Mike. "Some of the most competitive basketball I ever coached. I wanted to thank you for something specific," Mike said. "Your fourth-quarter coaching in Game 4, the way you kept your team focused when we were making our run, that taught me more about leadership than anything I've experienced." Riley smiled, with the expression of someone who'd been praised for many things throughout his career, but rarely for the quiet moments of leadership that didn't make highlight reels. "The best leaders stay calm when everyone else is panicking. Magic made the shot, but our job as coaches is to put players in position to succeed." Did you know how important those timeouts were? I knew our guys needed to stay focused on execution instead of getting caught up in the emotion. Championships are won by teams that can perform their best when the pressure is highest. That's what leadership is about, creating environments where people can achieve greatness. Mike treasured that brief conversation, understanding that he'd been able to discuss his most formative lesson about leadership with the person who'd created it. The exchange reinforced his belief that Riley's greatness had emerged not just from strategic knowledge, but from the ability to maintain composure and support others under impossible pressure. When Mike died in 2020 at age 56, after a brief battle with COVID-19, his family found among his possessions a carefully preserved ticket stub from June 9, 1987, Section 25, Row 8, Seat 12, Boston Garden. The ticket was mounted in a frame alongside a photograph of Pat Riley during his Lakers coaching days, and a typed note that read, "Sometimes $15 buys you 3 hours of entertainment. Sometimes it buys you a lifetime of understanding about leadership under pressure." Pat Riley taught me that great leaders create environments where others can achieve greatness, even when facing impossible circumstances. June 9th, 1987, the night I learned that championship leadership means staying calm when everyone else is panicking. The story of Game 4 of the 1987 NBA Finals became part of basketball folklore, remembered primarily for Magic Johnson's baby hook shot and the Lakers' championship that followed. But for those who had been there, who had felt the intensity in Boston Garden, who had watched great leaders perform under impossible pressure, individual moments of leadership stood out as much as athletic achievement. Mike O'Sullivan had spent $15 to watch his team face elimination, and instead had witnessed the most important lesson of his life about what separated great leaders from merely good ones. He had learned that championship success required not just talent and preparation, but leaders who could create environments where greatness could emerge even under maximum pressure. Magic Johnson's baby hook lasted maybe 2 seconds, but Pat Riley's fourth-quarter leadership had created the foundation that made that moment possible. And Mike O'Sullivan, a 23-year-old waiter from Southie who'd spent his tip money on a basketball ticket, had been there to see how championship leadership really worked. Sometimes, the moments that change your life aren't the ones that make the highlight reels. Sometimes they're the quiet moments when someone shows you what it means to lead others toward greatness, even when the odds seem impossible. Sometimes $15 buys you everything you need to know about leadership, composure, and the art of creating opportunities for others to succeed.